Hello. If you're wondering why I'm being so quiet, it's because I make bad life decisions. And it is currently 2:30 a.m. Yeah. Don't do what I do, kids. Moving on. Today, I will be talking about old fics. Pieces of fiction in the community, which honestly a lot of people probably haven't heard of it by this point. Now, honestly, this is mainly just because I had notable pieces of fiction that I didn't want to just mingle in with all the others, and especially considering all the other categories are way too large by now. Seriously, these videos are going to take up a lot of time. So yeah, bear with me if you can. So, in alphabetical order, we will start with Death's Head. Death's Head is a story by Gideon 020, who I talked about in the notable contributors video. It is a story where Taylor has the power to make incredibly powerful weaponry and armor and other things. But with one caveat, it has to feature fascist or Nazi or World War II Germany style imagery on it. And the main conflict of the story is the fact that the Empire 88 is actually a thing still. So Taylor has to go in through gratuitous gore, violence, and pretty awesome fight scenes, reclaim fascist and neo-Nazi symbols from actual neo-Nazis by fighting for the forces of good while dressed like a Nazi. It's actually pretty good. I would recommend it just for being a pretty good action flick. Next up we have Gather. Now, on a few of these will be very short, which is very disappointing and distressing because they are very good pieces of fiction. Gather, written by C and JLC, is a story about Taylor having Gleistigane's power. But instead of just being power wank, like unfortunately a lot of alternate power Taylor stories are, instead it is a street level story of how she struggles to start. It is rather short, but it was very, very enjoyable, and I really liked it back then. Because also back then, it was sort of a new idea, to be honest. Memoirs of a Human Flashlight by Goldenlark is honestly here as a representative of all the exalted worm fics there were in the beginning. Also because it was there by the time the first discussion thread had to be closed down and the second one opened. It's not too much of an outstanding piece of fiction, it just is, and it's a pretty decent read. Taylor joining the wards, doing hero things, just generic stuff, but still I would recommend it, if nothing but for the history. Next we have Morphosis. Morphosis, which is a cross between Worm and Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics, written by Non Sequitur, is about Taylor with the power of dreams. I honestly don't know the comics that well, unfortunately. But it was a really, really trippy, disassociated kind of writing, and it was honestly one of the first fics I read in the fandom. It might have been the first fic, potentially tying with Copacetic as well. But yes, it was really nice. I really liked it. It was so fantastical, it just sort of jarred with the way Worm usually works, so I liked it a lot. Next up, we have My Friends by Ice Blocks. In this fic, Taylor has the power of creating puppet, marionette, doll things. They are sentient beings that have powers of their own. This causes a lot of chaos down the road, and this story has a lot of interesting, unique conflict, and brings in a lot of interesting concepts and powers into play. I would highly recommend reading My Friends. Plus, it actually has a lot more meat on it compared to a few of these other suggestions. Next up, we have Nematomorpha, which was one of my favorite Tinker fics for a long time, and is still pretty up there, honestly. Nematomorpha by Atrio Carceris. I'm presuming it's Latin, sorry. Or Italian for that matter. Moving on. Nematomorpha is a worm alternate universe where Danny triggers with the QA shard for tinkering. As it's still the Queen Administrator shard, it still administrates a lot. And in this context, what it means is that he does not have any original tinker powers. He does not have access to anything. But the more he spends around tinkers, the more he gains their specialties. And so he gets a lot of synergy and the ability to meld skills from others, even though it is a very slow build. And I just liked it because I personally have a soft spot in my heart for long-term, gradual climb to power stories. And also because it was written really well, and it was really thought out how the powers would interact with each other. And honestly, I just loved it. I still love it to this day, even though there's only 2 arcs. What can you do? Yeah, I definitely recommend reading that. So Propagation, written by C and JLC. Yes, C and JLC, who also wrote Gather, is the story of a tailor who gets the powers of Eden after Syed is sad and needs another entity, and sees the Queen Administrator shudders and says, fuck it, why not? And so it is a rather rapid escalation of powers, but it was also quite nice back in the day. Next we have Shy Girl. Shy Girl, also by Gideon O20, is a story about Taylor with the powers to summon Shy Guys from Mario. But not only Shy Guys, Goombas, Chain Chomps, essentially anything from the Mario games besides Mario and maybe Bowser themselves. And they are very sociopathic, so this was also a very action-heavy fic. It was very fast, it was very intense, and it was really entertaining. And then it just ended. But yeah, that's the nature of these things, isn't it? Next we have Source of Escalation. This was by SOTF, and it was essentially what would happen if the reason Taylor is the way she is because her father was a retired cape who never missed. It is constant escalation, as the name would suggest, and it is an enjoyable but rather short ride. I would definitely recommend reading it. Sure, quality isn't the best, but for pure entertainment, it is one of the better. It is quite nice, and I really like it. Finally, last but definitely not least, we have Starry Eyes. Now, if you have no idea what Starry Eyes is a piece of fiction by Helney. It's a crossover with Lovecraft, and it has an incredibly odd way of integrating into the world. Some people have done setting swaps. Some people have made Brockton Bay a world of Shoggoths. Things have happened, and those are all really good fics. But this was incredible. Because of this fic, Taylor has no more insights. If Taylor cuts herself, she sees the void and the stars. She is a human-shaped, walking, talking portal to the Elder Gods. She is a walking, talking portal to the Elder Gods. Give or take. And by cutting herself, she can, in fact, allow things to escape and travel, which ends up in a cape who has literally cut off their own face. If you stare into them, you will see nothing but the abyss. And from within, all that comes out are literally Lovecraftian monsters. Keep in mind this piece of fiction had quite a large amount of humor in it as well. It was incredible. Honestly, this is one of the fics I'm most sad about not being continued. was amazing, mind-breakingly horrific story which, I cannot describe it. Starry Eyes is the story on this list I would most heavily recommend for you to read. Followed closely by Nematomorpha, and also Morphosis and My Friend, and then pretty much everything else on this list. But I would recommend going through all of it. I'd recommend going through what is effectively a history excursion through the annals of the very short legacy that we have of this fandom so far. From this point on, most of the pieces of fiction will be very, very recognizable, or more recent than 2014. The reason I wanted to do this as a separate list was because these were some of the first pieces of fiction I read and started following, and I just wanted to share part of my first wonder into this fandom. I want to share some of the first amazing things that I found once I'd finished Worm, when Wild Poet also finished writing it, when everything was just so new, when everything was just novel, when everything was just so wonderful to me, and the start of enjoying something new is always a wonderful thing. The problem with fanworks is everything comes and goes in the blink of an eye. What you saw one day will be gone the next. And so I would just like to share with you my own experiences, some of my first impressions of the fandom, and just some of the great things I've seen along the way. Thanks for bearing with me ramble on about absolutely nothing. See you guys next week.